Hello and welcome to 5-Year Club video number 188, where we read an article from University of Chicago, chicagobooth.edu. I guess that's I think it's the Booth School of Business. How poverty changes your mindset. Understanding psychology may be key to addressing the problem. Alice G. Walton, February 19th, so a few months ago now, 2018. And I think when I go through this, because I read the article earlier, gonna reread it, and I think that I do not have my cat is in the kitchen. Mari, down. No, out. See, you guys can tell this is a stressful working environment here. It's like a boiler room of keeping cats off of things. All right. I read it earlier, and I am not like a researcher on poverty, right? I'm not like a PhD in, psychology or economics or any of these things. And I would expect that my thoughts on these issues will change over my lifetime. Some of the stuff in this article doesn't jive with what I've learned from studying personal finance for the past 5 years. Not in terms of like surveys that I've done or official research projects, but just in terms of the situations that I see over and over again, especially situations called into financial radio programs, specifically Dave Ramsey's program. And so I think on the one hand, I want to make this so that if I view it years from now, I can be like, wow, you were really stupid. Or 5 years from now, I can be like, wow, I still agree with you. I don't know what it's going to be. It could go either way. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is I want to a lot of people, like, we read these articles online, but we don't consider alternative arguments to what the article is saying. We don't actively read the articles. And since I've looked at this stuff so much and I've formed definite opinions on certain issues, I can bring up the alternative points of view to this research as I read it. So I hope that would help you see two different sides of this coin, two different sides of the coin in this article. And then finally, I do think that this article brings up a valuable and valid point, which is that our money situation can affect our thinking, can affect our psychology. And if we're completely unaware that that's true, we have no way to understand that we might need to find a check or a balance against our thinking, right? And if we do know that, scarcity and money problems can affect our psychology, then we may not be able to perfect our psychology and completely counteract it all. But at the very least, we can say, you know what, I might be compromised in my thinking right now because I'm in one of those situations where I've learned that people have compromised thinking. So let's take a little bit more time to think about this. Let's get the cat out of the kitchen. Mari, down. No. And you're going to get sprayed next time. I'm going to go after this sprayer. And you can, knowing that your psychology could be compromised, you can go and spend more time on it, find additional resources. A very specific scenario is, Dave Ramsey says all the time to people, when someone close to you has died or when you've just gone through a really bad divorce, do not make major financial decisions within a year or two. Just don't do it. It's fine. You don't have to buy a house immediately. Just avoid making major financial decisions because your thinking is likely not going to be very good. All right, how poverty changes your mindset. Understanding psychology may be key to addressing the problem, by Alice G. Walton. The proportion of the global population living on less than $1.90 per person per day has fallen from 18% in 2008 to 11% in 2013, according to the World Bank. In the United States, however, the poverty rate has been more stubborn. 41 million people lived below the country's poverty line in 2016, about 13% of the population, nearly the same rate as in 2007. Right? So worldwide, this population falls, but in the US it stays about the same. Recent policy initiatives haven't meaningfully reduced that rate. House Speaker Paul Ryan, Republican of Wisconsin, indicated this past December that the government would make fighting poverty, but also welfare, which many Republicans believe is a failed policy, a priority in 2018. All right, so I think, you read the first paragraph, and on the surface, it says like the world is getting better, but the U.S. isn't. So you could think like, well, the U.S. must be doing something wrong if we can't match the rest of the world, right? But, if you think a little bit more about it, you got to understand that like 80% of the people on Earth live in low-income / poverty situations. And, just like if you're extremely fat, it's really easy to lose weight. Globally speaking, it's really easy to earn more money when you are earning so little in the first place. Because it takes less money per person to raise the standard than it would in the U.S., where everything is more expensive and the standards are different. The relative incomes are different. So, yeah, I mean, it's comparing apples and oranges is, I guess, the bottom line there, because the demographics of the populations and the dynamics are so different. U.S. lawmakers have expressed frustration when investments such as welfare programs don't pull people out of poverty. I believe in helping those who cannot help themselves, but would if they could, said Senator Orrin Hatch, Republican of Utah, this past December when explaining his views on government spending. I have a rough time wanting to spend billions and billions and trillions of dollars to help people who won't help themselves, won't lift a finger, and expect the federal government to do everything. Hatch's statement reflects a common view that removing government support would force many poor people to improve their conditions themselves. Without welfare and government assistance, would able-bodied people find a job, get an education, stop buying lottery tickets, and focus on paying bills? So, his point of view, I think, ignores a big segment of the population, which is people who are able-bodied, but they're not mentally all there. And I think this especially applies to older people in poverty. They may be able-bodied, but they're not of able mind. And I think that it's not fair, for him. It's not a correct characterization, okay, for him to say that that's their fault, that they're not of able mind anymore. The problem in that case is that they did not prepare for old age when they were of able mind. And that, to a large extent, is not addressed in this article, but it is a huge knob that can move poverty. If you take away all of the older people who are in poverty, that's a huge segment of that population. And if you were able to influence their lives so that when they were not in poverty, they saved more money and they prepared, that later affects the poverty rate. So I think this is just, it's a kind of a shallow analysis of the issue. Without welfare and government assistance, would able-bodied people find a job, get an education, stop buying lottery tickets, and focus on paying bills? Of course they wouldn't. Why? Because people tend to do more of what they've already done, right? So you take money away from somebody, and they're not going to be able to, move the needle on tons of bad habits all at once simply because they don't have enough money. They're just going to scrounge to find some money to keep on living, however that is. They're going to go into a worse living situation. They're going to, sure, they may try to get a job. They may apply for different kinds of government assistance if they can find it. They may apply for food from other charities. But, simply removing the assistance is not going to move the behavior on these kind of efficient behavior issues immediately, because that's just not an obvious... it's not the first thing that you do on the list when you're reactively trying to cover a money hole. Not quite, indicate researchers whose work is telling a different story of poverty. Contrary to the refrain that bad decisions lead to poverty, data indicate that it is the cognitive toll of being poor that leads to bad decisions. And actually, decisions that may seem counterproductive could be entirely rational, even shrewd. The findings suggest that to successfully reduce poverty, it would help to take this psychology into account. And we're going to evaluate as we read this kind of how rational and shrewd some of these decisions are in the studies. And I gotta say though, just going into this, that the idea that being poor causes people to make bad decisions, and if you just gave them money, their decision making would suddenly drastically improve, is not true. When you give people money, they tend to spend that money on the same stuff they're currently spending money on. So if they're spending money on good things, then they'll get more good things. So if they were already paying for an education, then they're going to dump more money into education and they're going to benefit. But if they were buying counterproductive things, if they were gambling a lot, they're just going to gamble even more now and get into even more gambling debt. So it's not going to help. What drives bad decisions? And they put bad in quotes here, which I find kind of weird. In a 2013 study published in Science, researchers from the University of Warwick, Harvard, Princeton, and the University of British Columbia find that for poor individuals, working through a difficult financial problem produces a cognitive strain that's equivalent to a 13-point deficit in IQ or a full night's sleep lost. And I think when they say working through a difficult financial problem, they mean someone who's working day to day in debt. They're worried about that $50,000 debt, that kind of thing. Not like pen to paper, a difficult financial problem. Similar cognitive deficits were observed in people who were under real-life financial stress. Okay, maybe I was wrong. Because this is saying real life. And this is, all right. In any case, they said similar. Theirs is one of multiple studies suggesting that poverty can harm cognition. I think I would like to understand, though. I would like to understand if you gave someone $300 and then had them put pen to paper solving a financial problem, or if you took $200 from a person and have them put pen to paper financial problem, would you see a difference in their ability to solve the financial problem? Or would it just be a difficult problem anyway? Are financial problems simply difficult for most people? I think that's an important thing to pay attention to. But it was the fact that cognition seems to change with changing financial conditions that Chicago Booth's Anuj K. Shah, along with Harvard's Sindil Mulanathan, I'm sorry, can't pronounce that, and Princeton's Eldar Shafir, two authors of the science paper, were interested in getting to the root of. They suspected that poverty might essentially create a new mindset, one that shifts what people pay attention to and therefore how they make decisions. Some say you really have to understand the broad social structure of being poor and what people do and don't have access to, says Shaw. Others say that poor individuals have different values or preferences. We stepped back and asked, is there something else going on? To test the idea, the researchers designed experiments that stripped away money and put other resources in demand. In one such study, the researchers had participants play variants of the popular games Wheel of Fortune, Angry Birds, and Family Feud, looking for how scarcity affected players' attention. Rich people in these constructs had more chances to earn points, so more time to play the game. Poor people had fewer chances. In the Wheel of Fortune style game, the researchers measured how cognitively fatigued the players became. Logic would predict that rich players would be more fatigued since they were allowed more turns to make more guesses. Instead, the researchers observed that poor players, having received fewer tries to guess at the answers, were more fatigued, having put more effort into each guess. Let's back up here a little bit. There's something I wanted to say about this IQ drop situation. And that is that being successful with money is not an IQ problem. It's an emotional problem. And because of that, you know, if I see research indicating a 10-point drop in IQ, do I think that's good? No, I don't think it's good. But I do recognize that if you have money problems that are driven by something underlying that's emotional, which is the vast majority of people with money problems, the IQ is not going to move. You know, you can increase someone's IQ by 10 points. They're still going to have those emotional problems. They're still going to rationalize their behavior. The IQ is not going to matter. All right, in an Angry Birds style game in which people tried to shoot targets, rich players were given more chances to train a virtual slingshot on a target. Poor players, given fewer attempts, spent longer lining up their shots, and many scored more points per shot than rich players. For all the extra shots rich players had, they didn't do as well proportionally. It seems that to understand the psychology of scarcity, we must also appreciate the psychology of abundance. If scarcity can engage us too much, abundance may engage us too little, the researchers write. In some ways, scarcity appears to make people better problem solvers. In these game versions of the world, says Shaw, the players randomly assigned to be poor focused on what was concrete and in front of them. And that's what happens in real life too, writes Shaw. Mulainathan and Shafir. Sorry, I'm terrible on that pronunciation. When money is tight, the very lack of available resources makes each expense more insistent and more pressing. A trip to the grocery store looms larger, and this month's rent constantly seizes our attention. Because these problems feel bigger and capture our attention, we engage more deeply in solving them. And make every shop count. Using a video game scenario to test the influence of scarcity, the researchers find that people with limited chances perform better. Okay, so borrowing an extra shots allowed, so debt is allowed in the yellow, or not allowed. Okay. So people who take out debt tend to do worse. People who don't take out debt, but who don't have much resources, they tend to do better. And we found that, this is interesting, that the rich players had way more shots, but theirs is actually reversed. The players who were not allowed to take out debt didn't do as well. So maybe this is noise, who knows. And let's back up here for this game. You guys can see my real life failure on this game. I haven't played it yet. I haven't touched this at all. For an illustration of how poverty can affect one's thought process, try the test below. We'll give you 20 seconds to review a list of words, then ask you to write down as many as you can recall. For more, see Money on the Brain below. Start. Rent, loan, phone, dollar, coin, gas bills. Rent, loan, phone, dollar, coin, gas bills. Rent, loan, phone, dollar, coin, gas bills. Expense, grocery, utilities. Rent, loan, phone, dollar, coin, gas bills, expense, grocery, utilities. Rent, loan, phone. Rent, loan, phone, something, coin, gas, bills, expenses, groceries, utilities. Those last words were okay, so it was rent, loan, phone, laundry, coin, gas, bills. I'm gonna put laundry here and hope that was the word. And then there's no way, I don't remember the last ones. I didn't even look at the words, so maybe I missed two, maybe more. We'll see what happens. Okay, let's go see what it says. Uh-oh. I left out the magic word. No, I missed the word money. I'm an idiot. You remembered 6 out of 12 words correctly. Just as significant, you left out the magic word money. Although money was not on the list in an experiment. Oh, it wasn't on the list. Good. Okay. Poor participants were more likely to remember seeing it, as the words on the list are all associated with financial concerns. Percentage in the original experiment who included the word money, 15%. Okay. Wait, so I only got 6? Did I change some pluralities in there? Maybe. Ugh. That's upsetting. I should have memorized how many were plural or singular or whatever. I think, so memory tasks like this, from what I've read, are all about connecting the words that you see or the things you're trying to remember with as many other concepts that are already in your brain. And so the more patterns you can notice, the more effectively you're going to remember the things. I tried to do just remembering it through hearing it. That's why I repeated it out loud a bunch. But apparently it only worked like 6 out of 12. Wish I'd gotten 7. I feel dumb. Okay. And keep going. Yes, because these problems feel bigger and capture our attention, we engage more deeply in solving them. Unfortunately, one way to solve the problem in the short run is to borrow, which can backfire. In the experiments, when poor participants were allowed to borrow resources, that borrowing undid some of the advantages of scarcity. When the researchers looked at performance as a function of borrowing, they find that poor players often borrowed more than they should have and performed better when they weren't permitted to borrow. Poverty led to wise decisions, but it also led to counterproductive ones. Trade-offs become real. Shah, Mullainathan, and Shafir looked further into how poverty affects decision-making and find that poor people may evaluate trade-offs better than their wealthier counterparts. Just as the Angry Birds players spent more time lining up a shot, people with actual financial concerns might also make better, more focused decisions, closer to what economists consider ideal. The researchers asked real people of various socioeconomic strata if they were willing to travel an extra 30 minutes to save $50 on a $300 tablet. Some said they were, but when asked if they'd drive that far to save the same amount on a $1,000 tablet, some of the respondents changed their minds. Their answer depends on their income. Many people were irrationally more likely to say yes when buying a $300 tablet, when buying a $300 tablet rather than a $1,000 one. But that response was more common among wealthier people. For poorer individuals, the cost of the tablet often didn't matter. Regardless of the price, they were just as likely to travel for the discount. That's the correct financial decision, according to traditional economics, to drive the extra distance no matter the original cost. Saving $50 is the same regardless of the amount of the item in question, but wealthier participants saw the savings in relative terms, noticing the percentage savings. By contrast, poor participants thought in absolute terms. To them, $50 saved was $50 to spend on groceries or the electric bill. The same pattern showed up in experiments that involved smaller and larger amounts of money or other rewards. Even calories fit the pattern. People who were dieting and therefore in a scarcity mindset recognized that an order of McDonald's fries was just as fattening, whether thought of in terms of daily or weekly calorie intake. But people who were not dieting were more swayed by context. Once again, scarcity prompted the more accurate decision. Accurate. How do we evaluate these things? So I gotta say, growing net worth, becoming wealthy, is not about whether or not you save $50 on a tablet. It's about whether or not you prioritize savings as a percentage of your budget. And that was not what they asked in this study. And, while I can agree that $50 is $50, no matter if you're spending $1,000 or spending $500, and it's not like the distance changed here, so I don't think we can make an argument that wealthier people value their time more. I am not sure that this kind of logic and reasoning is what separates people who become wealthy from people who remain poor. And therefore, I'm not sure that measuring it has given us a very interesting result from my point of view. All right. Put it into practice. If people in poverty are making smart decisions considering the situation, how could that be recognized and better encouraged? Well, it should be, making the right decision should be the reward in and of itself, right? There may be ways to help people when they're facing potentially expensive borrowing decisions. For example, Chicago Booth's Marianne Bertrand and University of California at Berkeley's Adair Morse studied high-interest payday loans and find that people made better decisions when the interest rate was expressed in terms of dollar amounts, namely the cost they'd pay over 3 months. Okay, but again, if you're taking out the payday loan, you're already in trouble, and you're just, I don't know if the point here is that, I don't know what the point is. You're more rationally taking out a payday loan, you're already in trouble. You're already upside down on your budget. We'd explain this by saying that a dollar amount is a lot more concrete, says Shaw. You can think about exactly what you'd have to give up to pay off the loan. So they're decreasing the cognitive load of evaluating the loan. And I think that's a good thing, and I think it's a quality consumer financial protection regulation that should be put into place, just like mortgage disclosures have very specific rules about how people must say things. Credit card disclosures now have certain things that have to be in there, and I would prefer more. And I think that we need to force these shady financial places to be even more brutally honest, just as brutally honest as possible. Otherwise, they will bury all their trash in tons of lines of fine print. But again, I think a lot of these small logical money decisions are not what separates people who grow wealthy from people who do not. It's the emotional attitude towards money and the overall big budget picture that separates them. And of course, there's the earning power side, which is it goes both ways. People who have emotional problems in general earn less money and do worse at school. And that's caused by the emotional problems. If you give people emotional education early in life, they make better grades later on. What? Yeah, it turns out it's true. Program designers and policymakers often suffer from a failure to accurately take the perspective of the people they are trying to help, says Chicago Booth's Christopher J. Bryan. They design programs that would be appealing to people if they had the luxury of being able to devote careful thought and attention to considering them. But poverty imposes a heavy attentional tax that prevents people from devoting that kind of thought to new opportunities, so program uptake is low. Bryan was the lead author of a policy paper that recommended new strategies to policymakers and other relevant parties based on recent findings. I would like to understand, when he says that, that poverty has an extra tax, I would like to understand better did I just go? Yeah, I just went to a different page. Before the people were in poverty, how much processing power did they have? So that you can actually say that this tax is what's causing the difference there, rather than the population to begin with was kind of taxed with these sorts of problems, or just couldn't be bothered to think about them. I know that I myself have delayed doing things that I knew I should do, and I lost thousands of dollars just because I didn't want to think about it. And it wasn't even a matter of of could I process it. It was just a bad emotional avoidance thing. Yeah. And I wonder how much of this, they don't talk about emotional avoidance here, but I wonder how much of this is like people closing their eyes and not wanting to look at their budget because they know how bad it is. It's not that they mentally can't process IQ-wise the budget. It's that they don't want to experience the emotional pain of understanding how screwed they are in more depth. Brian was the lead author of a policy paper that recommended new strategies to policymakers and other relevant parties based on recent findings. Among other things, he and his co-researchers advise that an effort be made to reduce the upfront cost of future-oriented behaviors. For example, they point out that in a study by researchers at the World Bank, Harvard, and Yale, giving kids free school uniforms boosted school enrollment in Kenya by more than 6 percentage points. Similarly, researchers at Stanford, Harvard, and the University of Toronto, in conjunction with H&R Block, find that offering U.S. students assistance with their applications for federally funded college student aid has been shown to increase enrollment in college by 24%. Federally funded college student aid. I'm going to assume that that's not loans. And I get to this part of it, and I'm like, you know what? Like, kids, I will throw money at kids all day because they have not had a chance yet to save for themselves, for their futures. They have not had a chance to learn the stuff yet. They still have, young, healthy brains that are developing and are much more easy to change and mold by having things like school savings programs in place. And so I think that, money that we throw at schools, whether it's to subsidize school lunches or for after-school programs or for just better education at crappy schools, is money well spent, and I would not consider that in the same category as kind of like poverty alleviation money, which I think you have to consider two ways. I think you have to consider part of that money, poverty alleviation money, you have to consider part of it just like charity, and part of it as like, okay, I'm putting this money into this type of program because I think it will help people work to support themselves. And then you have to decide what the balance of that is going to be. How much of a return on investment are you expecting from your poverty alleviation funds? And when do you expect it, and how early do you apply it, and all that stuff? The researchers urge service providers to weigh price and convenience carefully, particularly when offering health-related services, which many people may forego if the cost or distance is too great. A program in Uganda brought health products such as water purification tablets and anti-malarial drugs to people door to door, which removed the issue of making people travel to get these products. That simple step to counter the inconvenience of seeking out products and services had an effect. It can sometimes be better to charge a small fee and make a service very convenient than to charge nothing for a very inconvenient service, writes the researchers. In this case, the cost of delivery was included in the price of the products. I think this is an interesting point, right? Which is kind of like things have different prices. They have a dollar price, they have a time price, they have a travel price. And it's an interesting concept to kind of measure all three of those at once in order to say what the cost of something is, than to only measure one or the other or translate between them. The researchers also recommended taking into account the timing of incentives, and they advised to avoid offering them when money is tight and people are consumed with the pressing need to budget what little they have to meet basic needs. In India, where sugarcane farmers are paid annually after the harvest, farmers' attention scores were the equivalent of 10 IQ points higher than just before the harvest, when farmers were relatively poor, according to data from the 2013 science study mentioned earlier. I gotta say again, they're talking about IQ points here. I don't think that's the relevant measure. That's not to say that I think the point here is bad. I think the point here is good, but you'd probably want, I think about it differently. I think about it in terms of retirement savings, right? So you have someone who's just hired on at a job, right? And they're filling out their payroll paperwork. And they have the opportunity there to set aside money into a savings account. Well, if you have someone who's just starting a new job, they're probably at least a week or two from their next paycheck, and they may already be kind of short on cash for some short-term gap that they needed to make up in between jobs. And therefore, right when they start the new job is not the time to hit them up for savings. You want to wait until they have a paycheck or two and they're more flush with cash, and then hit them with a savings takeout opt-out form where it says, like, here's the form, unless you're going to be saving 10%, 20% of your income, whatever it is, from here on out, unless you fill in this form and submit it. Offering subsidies or other incentives when people are more receptive to and have a spare capacity to consider them, such as after a harvest or a payday, may make a difference over the long run. One effort in Tanzania asked people to sign up for health insurance at cash point locations right after payday, and the timing led to a 20 percentage point increase in health insurance use. Yes, I want a 20 percentage point increase in retirement account use. That would be sweet. Introducing cognitive aids can help address the limited capacity for attention that may constrain people in poverty. In one study, it helped to show farmers research regarding the most productive ways to plant their crops. When poor, stressed, and in a scarcity mindset, farmers had a harder time taking in the information. This result has nothing to do with the intelligence of the farmers, writes Brian's team. A fact is only obvious if the observer has the spare attentional capacity to notice it. They also suggest that reminders in the form of text messages or stickers can be effective. Such gentle pushes, for instance, to take medication on schedule, can help people remember to do what they may otherwise forget, since other duties and obligations may compete for attention. That is why the 5-Year Club is filming every single day this year. Woo! For those who design and implement anti-poverty initiatives, it's important to recognize that while scarcity can help people focus on costs and benefits, it can also cause stress that shifts attention and steals cognitive bandwidth. A big step forward would be to understand these psychological limits that poverty imposes and make some policy tweaks, write researchers, to substantially improve the impact they have on the poor. All right, so, 2 takeaways at the end I'm going to say is, number one, again, if you want to fight poverty, you need to fight poverty before it happens. So you need to fight you need to talk to people who have low net worth and a decent income. And so there's no reason why they should end up in poverty. But they're not saving. So they will, unless they change their behavior. That's one thing. And the second thing is, if you really want to fight poverty, you need to get rid of the situations where people are not earning any money. So for people who are not in that savings situation, for single moms who are earlier in their life and didn't have time to build up a lot of money and didn't have time to get an education because they had a kid, you really need to help them get an economically productive education. That's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter whether you do that by giving them money and then they pay for an economically productive education, or whether that's unlikely and so you're going to simply, say you're showing up at this office on this day at this hour. Here's the daycare. We're gonna, train you in one of these 7 economically productive areas. Go, go, go. The only way you're going to sustainably get people out of poverty is to make them economically productive themselves. Otherwise, you're going to continue subsidizing that particular situation, regardless of who it is. It's just going to be the same people falling into the same traps generation after generation until you, understand why they're not earning money and then do the things you need to do to help them earn more money. And that's not a money issue. That's an action issue. That's knowing what the economically productive jobs are, knowing what they are in certain areas, understanding if there are people who need to move. Money may be a part of it. Maybe money is a tool in solving that problem. But the problem itself is much more complex than simply saying, these people need $1,000 more a month, or $500 more a month, or $250 more a month, or whatever it is. So that's my opinion on it. Orrin Hatch can go suck an egg. I don't care anything about, Republicans or their policies, because I think that Republican politics is crap right now. But, you know, someone in the article is just saying that, like, if we gave people more money, they would think better and then they wouldn't be poor anymore. That's also a load of crap. We have habits. The habits make us wealthy. The habits make us poor. To move people sustainably in a better direction, we have to understand what's in their heads, what's driving their emotions, and we have to change that. And it's not just money. So, yeah, that's it. That's my point of view on this article. Very interesting topic. I love reading about the psyche of this. I love understanding the psyche of this. I think it's very powerful. But that's it for video number 188. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a fabulous evening.